Welcome, welcome, welcome. Here we are back with another episode. Took about a week hiatus, a little busy at work, so we have a lot to catch up on. I will start and jump in right away. This episode, I would like to do probably like a preview thing of the race in the National and the American leagues. We have a lot of tight playoff races. A lot of cool information to show you on the sheet here. So here's a open look at the standings. If you look at it right away, a couple things stand out. One is the Boston Red Sox running away with the AL East with a really dominant team at 67 wins already, 72% win percentage. So they're looking like the early favorites, of course. Then we have a couple really good second, third, fourth, and fifth place teams in the AL East. The AL East has been really competitive. I think you could make an argument that they've been the best division in the AL 6 consecutive years. I guess this is the seventh season now of TLG. It's 2020, then 21 through 26. So 7 seasons now, and every single season they have had like one or two playoff teams, and a bunch of years they've had. Now that you have the 6 seeds in the playoffs, you get 3 wild cards, 3 division winners. Last year they had all three, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the same standings, just in a different order. I think it was Montreal and the Yankees locking up the wild card spots, and maybe the Blue Jays. I can't remember exactly. But so this year, you got those 3 teams right there, separated by 4 games. And then you got the Expos trailing a little bit more, about 5 more games back, but not out of it yet. The Expos are also 8-2 in their last 10, not giving up. It's a feisty team. If you look here at the wild card, it's pretty wild. You get the Toronto Jays with a nice little lead in the wild card, but after that, it's crazy. You get about 6 teams here, 7 teams from 41 to 47 to 40 wins, and they're all like 1 game back at that third spot here too. You get New York, KC, and then Detroit and Houston. Houston is probably the most talented team, talent-wise, on this list of 7 teams, 8 teams here. But they are lacking quite a bit of pitching after a couple unlucky regressions and injuries and stuff. So Houston is pretty terrifying now, because you look at those lineups, it really stands out how much offensive firepower they have with Pena, Bellinger, Gallo, Hayes, really good. So that's a really interesting team down there. 41 wins, really starting to recover. If you look at their info page, they've come back from a horrendous April to play about 500 ball the last 2 months, and they're 4-1 this month. So they're starting to finally recover quite a bit. They are back up to almost leading the league there in zone rating. Pretty good defense, but the pitching has been very suspect. As I mentioned before, they've had pretty big regression there from certain guys. So they still got some arms though. Matt Manning and you got Taylor there, both really talented dudes. So you have all those teams in the battle right now. You have Texas is starting to run away a little bit with the West, but Los Angeles is not impossibly back, as in able to catch Texas. But I'd say Texas has a pretty nice chance at the time to hold on there. But you never know. That LA team is also pretty solid. They got Marcelo Mayer, a couple big stars there. Marte, I like. Brandon Marsh always seems to put up these really good seasons, 2 and 4, and on pace for 3 WAR this season, which is makes him pretty nice. You got Julio Rodriguez there in the outfield. Pretty nice lineup. Pretty solid team there. So I think those are going to be a couple things to watch for sure. You're going to have a crazy AL East down the stretch here. Big trade deadline coming up. The Yankees spent a lot of money in the offseason on a few guys. Last year, they really hit off on Verdugo. He had a huge season, on pace for another really good season this year. This year's big signee hasn't started so hot. Dylan Cease he actually leads the league in losses at 11. But I'm sure he'll bounce back a bit in the second half. They got a really nice pitching rotation there. A lot of really good arms there. And if you look at their team, no one really is quite playing up to par. Almost every single player on their team is playing about 10% below their talent level, in my opinion. You got, I think he's playing right around his talent level. But yeah, Devier Garcia could probably play a little bit better. And then Severino is probably just a tad better than his stats are showing. You got the dominant closer. I love this guy. Dom Smith's only hitting 239. And Gary Sanchez only hitting 230, although he has lost some contact. Gleyber Torres only hit 240 when he's almost a 300 hitter almost every other year. So you do have quite a bit of guys that could step up for the Yankees in the second half and really push them a little bit. I think Baltimore is another fun team to watch. Baltimore sneakily, I think, has the two guys that lead the league in hits. So you have Figueroa and then Ozzie Albies, who both are just mashing the baseball quite a bit this year. Good singles hitters. Figueroa has quietly turned into one of the best players in baseball already. At the age of 26, he's got 60 contact. The guy's hitting 318. He only strikes out 11% of the time, and he has 23 stolen bases with 0 caught stealing. He's on pace for 6 WAR, and that's pretty amazing. 75 speed, 75 stealing. A little switch hitter. Just love that profile. Really, really interesting player. Still 10 away and 15 points away from his potentials in contact and home run power, and he's still on pace for 6 WAR. Just shows the kind of talent he has. If he can reach those, he might turn into arguably the best player in baseball in a year or two, but we'll see if he can get there. And again, for those at home, I mentioned last episode, that 60 to 70 jump, that's 20%. Every 10 you go up, so he's still 20% and 25% away from his power, or 30% away from his power actually, which is pretty phenomenal. Kind of stats he's putting up. So that's a really interesting team. They got 2 really good pitchers here too, and Crispin and Rocker, the young stars, 23 and 26 years old. Francisco Crispin is a real life dude that starts super young in the dynasty as an international guy in the complex. And then you got Kumar Rocker, who was the first pick and just developed into a star. He's on pace for an amazing season also. He's on pace for 6 WAR, which is right around his talent level. Strikes out a ton of batters, doesn't walk too many. Really, really consistent. If you look at his last 3 years, he's always K'd about the same. This year it's up to 29. Always about 7 or 8 hits per 9. His ground ball rate's gone up a little bit this year, and if you look, very, very consistent. The BABIP's actually extraordinarily high, so if anything, he should be playing even better than his season would indicate. That's why you see that 2.91 FIP with a 4 ERA. So really, really phenomenal player they got there. So that's a couple teams to really keep your eye out for. In the NL, and I didn't really mention the AL Central. It seems like Chicago has a pretty big lockdown on that. KC is in that wild card battle. Same with Detroit. Looks like Minnesota has kind of unloaded some assets, and Cleveland and looking to build towards the future. That Central, I think KC definitely still has a chance, though. They've gone kind of cold lately, but they were in the lead for quite a while there. That White Sox team just has so much firepower in the pitching lineup with the 3 young guys now. Jones, Massey, and Soto actually remind me quite a bit of the young. When I was a kid, I always remember the Oakland 3, Barry Zito and Tim Hudson, and those guys always just being such beasts. And the 3-headed monster they had, those 3 young pitchers. And it just kind of reminds me a little bit of that. The trio, all under the age of, was it 20? They're 22, 26, and 24. So all under the age of 27, and all look like number ones on most teams. I think Soto especially looks like a star because he has the highest combination of stuff and control. Massey is probably the best of the bunch right now. Got that 80 changeup, 4 really good pitches, 2 of them above 70 and the other 2 60s. Looks like an absolute star, but Jared Jones and has that fireballer arm, not quite the control the other 2 guys have, but just an unbelievable talent nonetheless. He's actually still only 24, which is wild. He was a high school guy. But yeah, that team with those pitchers and the big bats they got, Pacheco is turning into one of the best players in baseball. He is a 65 shortstop. That's a captain with 60 power, which just went up. My scouting report just got a +5 bump on that. This guy looks like a mega star. There's quite a talented group of young shortstops in TLG. Luke Lato, and you got Robert Poisson on St. Louis. And then you have Marcelo Mayer on the Angels now. And then you got Pacheco. I'm probably forgetting about 1 or 2. But that's quite the 4-star start. Oh, and Machado on Pittsburgh. Those 5 are all just absolutely amazing, all around the same age. All between, I think, 23 to 25 kind of thing. So Napier also in Arizona is an amazing talent too. Napier has 55 contact. He's hitting 250, on pace for over 20 bombs. Nice 4 WAR season. His young guy that just debuted and had 40 games in 25 in LA and got traded. So he had about 73 total games in the majors last year. So this is like his first full season, on pace for about 4 WAR. So that guy, those shortstops are all just so good. And like I said, I'm probably forgetting a few off the top of my head, but really exciting thing when you have a bunch of young shortstops like that. Again, throwback to kind of when I grew up. It just reminds me of all those stud shortstops are in the league at the same time with A-Rod and Jeter and Garcia Parra and just all those amazing talents that I grew up watching and falling in love with baseball because of. So yeah, that White Sox team is gonna be tough to catch, but I think KC and Detroit there aren't impossibly far back. In the NL, we have my Phillies, who started very slow. I was expecting a huge 100-win season with the talent I had. Started very slow with some of the bats, but we were definitely picking it up lately and starting to recover. We've had a pretty good last month and a half. Pretty middle of the pack with everything. Pretty solid pitching for the stadium I'm in. It's a little bit better the last few years, but still nothing to sneeze at. Sixth place there. It's the offense that's been a little bit low. I've always been the top three almost every year. We've fallen to more of the fifth, sixth kind of in a lot of categories. But yeah, I think as you can see, we went 11-4 in April, and then we were above 500 each of the last 3 months so far, starting hot in July. So really good recovery there, but this division is just so close. It's crazy. Washington is a really, really interesting team. Washington's getting phenomenal pitching of a few guys. You got Giolito and Bayard having monster seasons. The young guy Kepner has really had a solid season too. Bayard's really been special though. This guy is a 1.01 whip. He is at 9 wins already, a 2.48 ERA, which leads the league, both leagues, I think. Batter's only hitting 221 off him. This was an incredible signing. This was actually an independent league signing back in 2020, and he was like a 40 movement, 50 and stuff guy, and 55 control, and he's gone up quite a bit in each of those categories. He's gained 10 movement, and he's gained 10 or 15 control, and he's turned into a 30-year-old guy that has had a really nice major league career with really good seasons here. As you look, he's been pretty consistent with his walks, always about 5%, which is incredible. Probably in the 95th percentile type thing. So that guy has had a really awesome year. They have a young guy. Where was he here? I was just looking at him earlier. I thought they had him as a closer. Yeah, so Barzell, I was just looking at. Almost forgot about him. He was a Rule 5 guy, and he had a crazy talent change. He's gone from 50 current, 60 potential stuff to 70 in the last year. And he's turned into a pretty big-time arm, a ground ball guy with an 80 curveball. So he can keep that ball. He hasn't played incredibly hot this year, but that's also a very hard park to pitch in. Big pitcher's park there. The stats are, if you look at the stats here, if you go to info and you go to ballpark, as you can see, the overall, everything's above on the offensive side of things. The home runs are up 13% overall, and the doubles are up 15%. And so it's really hard to, as a pitcher there sometimes, and have good stats. But yeah, so that's the top two teams there. And then Atlanta's tied with Washington at 47 wins there. Atlanta just made a big trade for Jansen, the catcher. So that should be a big upgrade there. He's had a phenomenal career in TLG. They have got a really big season so far out of Suarez. He's had a nice year. And the pitchers have all played pretty well. Pearson at 3.6 ERA, Soroka at 2.9 with 10 wins. Garrett Coles had started off with a pretty average season. It looks like he's had a couple of really good starts late to kind of recover. And he's still striking out about 22% of guys, but down quite a bit from the 28-25 the last few years. We'll see if he can. I was looking at that right. Never mind. So we'll see if he can recover and keep it up the second half. Dakota Hudson has had a bad year so far for his standards. He has lost a little bit at the age of 31, but he still looks like a pretty good pitcher. We'll see. He had a little stint in the bullpen there. Tejada is the young guy. He's had quite a few appearances. So that's a really nice starting five. Atlanta's got Sabatka is at a 5 ERA this year. He's looks like he's not had the hottest of years with a 5.3 FIP and a 1.9 WHIP. Pretty weak compared to what he's normally done. So that's cost them quite a bit from the looks of it. And Trevor Rosenthal, the second best talent, is at a 5.6 ERA. So I'd imagine those guys will play a lot better in the second half, which should be good for Atlanta. And then the Mets are only one win back from that. The Mets have a phenomenal pitching staff with all 5 guys being really good. 3 of them lefties. Escada has been unbelievable. The dude has had incredible season, walking only 4% of guys. He's jumped up his K rate each of the last 3 years, if you notice, from 17 to 19 and 22. So he's gone and he's only limited batters to 179 this season batting average. So he's pretty much arguably turned into a top 5 pitcher in baseball. His combination is control with the lack of home runs, 0.2 per 9, is just insane. So that guy is a 5-pitch unicorn. Only throws 89, but has incredible control and spin on the ball. So just an amazing, amazing talent. Kind of like a Tom Glavine type, I guess, if you think of a soft throwing lefty with incredible control and movement and stuff. Really, really cool. And then Barrios is another ground ball guy with crazy movement and control. So a couple guys are just not going to walk anybody, and that combo of playing those two guys is really tough. I've found out playing them quite a bit this season. Barrios pretty much the same. He's just striking out a little bit less than Escada so far, but he's also had quite a bit, about 40 more innings logged. Also walking under 5% of guys. So just incredible between those two. And then you get the young guy Sandoval, who's pitched okay, just let up way too many home runs, but his rates of walking Ks are there, so he's just got to kind of even out that home runs. As you can see, he let up a ton last 4 games, 6 in total. So they should recover. So it looks like Atlanta and the Mets probably are both going to play a little better than that in the second half, if I had to guess. So it should be just an incredibly tight race, all 4 teams. And then Miami is only 8 games back. They have a really solid ball team, too. Probably consistently the best 5th place team in the league almost every single season. If you look at the bottom of the all the 5th place teams in baseball the last 4 or 5 years, I think they're always first or second in wins out of the 5th place team. So it's just a really tough division for Miami, because all 4 of those other teams are such talented squads with big budgets and stuff. So Miami's always competitive, though, as that 5th seed. In the Central, we have St. Louis and Pittsburgh. This is probably my favorite battle so far out of the entire league. I really expected Pittsburgh to be about 10 wins better in St. Louis at the start of the year. St. Louis, I thought, would be pretty nasty. I just didn't think they'd quite be better than Pittsburgh yet. And it still might not be. The season's long, and it's only a 5-game lead or 4-game lead, I guess. But that division is really something to keep an eye on. I have the head-to-head on my other screen here. I'll drag it over. So if you look at the head-to-head, overall of all time, St. Louis actually has the win over Pittsburgh, 66-57. The all-time, this current season, we have St. Louis 5-4 over Pitt. So it's kind of cool if you look. You just go to the stats and you go to head to, or it's somewhere in here. I forget where I found it, but yeah, it's in historical, and you go to head to head, and you can change some stuff. So it's really cool seeing those 2 teams match up. If you look at the scores this season in 2026, they've all been relatively low scoring. Both really good pitching teams, both pitching stadiums. Both teams struggle a little bit on offense until this last game, 10-9. But if you look at almost all the games here, you see a lot of 2 and 3 runs and 4 runs. Do not see any games with over 5 runs, except for the 7 runs here and 6 runs here. So those 2 teams are very, very evenly matched. If you look at the roster specifically, St. Louis has a ton of power. I'd imagine they're pretty high up in here in home runs. Yeah, second in home runs, which is really powering their offense. They're not really in the top 5 in anything else. Just really living off those home runs at the moment with a big slugging percentage. Middle of the pack, 7th in offense, but it's the pitching that's kept them, and the defense, which is a really good combo. First in zone range, Poisson and Pache, pretty much single-handedly, I imagine. So if you look at that, almost plus 20 zone range, I'd imagine those guys account for like 75% of that. I think we got a plus 11 out of Poisson, and Pache is at a plus 5. So yeah, I was pretty much right. About 85% of that total zone range is just those 2 players. That's how elite defensively the shortstop and center fielder are there, which are the 2 most important defensive positions other than catcher. You got first in defensive efficiency also, just an insane defense. And then, yeah, limiting teams to 279 BABIP, which is crazy. Second in batting average allowed, and second in runs allowed, and second in bullpen ERA, and third in starter ERA. So just incredible team overall. If they could just hit a little better offensively with the batting average, they'd be right up there with like a Boston in terms of dominance, just because of how good the pitching and defense has been. I think they're pretty good candidate to add a big bat too. I think they just did make a big trade, I think, for Tyler Freeman there, so that should be pretty scary. I think Miranda's had a nice season, a rookie on pace for over 20 home runs. Should just keep getting better and better with age. That guy's an insane talent at 20 years old. Expect him to have just keep getting better every day. I think Carrier here's had a pretty weak season. He's still on pace for almost 30 bombs, but he's hitting pretty weak, so if he can recover, that should help them quite a bit. Torkelson on pace for almost 40 bombs, and you just look throughout that lineup. Well, Poisson's essentially been the second best player in the NL in the MVP race. We'll go over that in an episode or two. Poisson's on pace for 34 home runs and 8 WAR. Just an absolutely incredible talent. Probably the most talented dude in all baseball. If you combine the defense with the bat and the power and the stealing, just an insane superstar that guy's turned into. So yeah, really exciting team there. If you look at Pittsburgh, so yeah, that's fun. Wow. And then Pittsburgh, you got a team that's sixth in total defense. You have them about the exact same in pitching, second and third. I think St. Louis was third and second when it started in bullpen ERA. The bat pip's quite a bit higher, which is some luck involved. Also, second least in walks and first in strikeouts. So that's an incredible pitching staff. And I think St. Louis was pretty much seventh in everything offensively. Pittsburgh looks like they're about ninth and 10th. So the main difference is the teams are almost the exact same. It's just Pittsburgh is really not quite the power that St. Louis has, so which has pretty much been the difference this season. St. Louis second in home runs, Pittsburgh seventh. But if you look at the team, Pittsburgh's probably got the higher end pitchers. I think St. Louis's are playing a little above their head right now. Pittsburgh's pitchers are just insane. They got the big three, and I think they got the fourth with Dustin May is injured still, but I don't know. Brea is obviously the star that's injured right now. So they have quite a bit of injuries there, but I'd imagine that's going to be a tight battle right down to the wire. That team is really solid all around. Not a lot of big weaknesses other than a little bit of lack of power. But again, that stadium really limits the home runs. Triples are down 16, or what is that, 16%. And the home runs are down a ton, like 15% at least. So yeah, you just get almost no home run power out of those righty bats. So it's a really hard stadium to hit home runs in. So the double numbers are always pretty good for them. But yeah, that's kind of the story of those two teams battling it out there. It looks like the Reds and Brewers are pretty far back now, but also with big second halves could make a little bit of noise there. And then in the West, that's our final big time battle. That one's crazy with Arizona, the Giants, the Rockies, Dodgers, Padres, all within 13 games of each other. The Rockies are playing very well. They're at 51 wins for a young team. The top two are just phenomenal baseball clubs all around. Arizona will start with in first place. Arizona's got Mike Trout, obviously, who is the best player in baseball. He's on pace for 8 WAR. I guess you can make a case Soto might be a little better now, but Trout, I think, still has that title. He just never fell off. He's just incredible. And so you got Trout in the middle of that lineup with Yordan Alvarez when he's healthy, just smashing bombs. Napier's come a long way with the big power bat, so that's a big cleanup spot there. The big story about this team is how well the Hedges and that pitching staff plays. I think we'll do an episode on Brea, so I won't talk about him too much here, but he's had a phenomenal season. You got the really nice pitching staff with 3 really solid guys so far this year. Mastrodome is one of the best young arms in the league. I expect a little bit more progression out of him soon. Looks like he's only walking 6% of guys, which means his control is probably a bit better than 45. And you got the big time control guys in Marquez and Burns, both really solid. You got Burns is these guys aren't having great seasons, but they're not having terrible seasons either. Only walking 3% of guys for Marquez. Just insane. Limiting those walks, striking out quite a bit of guys there from the bullpen. And then the offense, you just are led by those kind of big bats in the middle of the lineup, and then a bunch of defensive guys everywhere else. You got Gil Morey having another huge season, monster season last year, and following up with an even bigger season this year so far. He's already only about a WAR and a half away from last season's total. He's hitting 310. Just incredible the last 2 years Gilmore's had there. Amazing. So then you got in second place there, the Giants, who probably have one of the scarier teams I've seen. Really terrifying to play against. I just lost a bunch of games against them the last 2 sims. You got the big couple pitchers there. Rutledge having a huge season. Faedo's made a huge improvement. If you look at that movement, you can see how much that's gone up over the years. It's peaked all the way to 45 in his age 30 season with the highest stuff and control he's had to. So that's just a guy that's really come a long way, and it's gone from averaging almost 2 home runs per 9 early in his career almost every season to all the way down to 1 this year in a pitcher-friendly park, but also in improving that movement. So the combination of those two things made him really solid. And then you have Griffin Canning, who has had a little bit of a weaker season, but also has just barely played. So we'll see how he can do. He's got big time control too. So that pitching staff's nice. And then obviously we've talked about the hitters quite a bit. You have the monster power. You sort their power. You got 275s, a 65, 360s, 255s, which is pretty insane. And then you have a bunch of big contact guys at the top there too, with Ramos, Leto, and Hudson Potts and Arenado, all plus contact tools. And then you have a lot of really good defensive players in that lineup with Arenado, obviously, and Leto as the craziest combo in the league there. Both like 70 range, third baseman, shortstop guys. So that's a really scary, really, really nasty team. Didn't even talk about Hader. That's how loaded they are. So you can get to him. Rockies, we will talk about here for a second. The Rockies are powered by a big bat in Olsen and a big bat season out of Alec Thomas, who's just been insane, had a huge 25-game hit streak. You have a couple monster pitching talents in Susak and Wright. Sapuki's having a little bit of a down year. Sellinger's had a pretty nice season, on pace for almost 5.5 WAR. Sellinger is crazy 24% strikeout percentage out of a lefty, which is insane. One of the most electric lefties in the season. And then you got the big late season signing just before spring training there. We got Aiden Hauser signed a big $23 million deal for the 1 year, front loaded with a smaller second year. Season he's having, he might actually decline that $12 million player option for next year. But Hauser has been nasty. He's also a lot of guys you see in this 24 to 7 to 8 ratio we've talked about today. That's kind of a sign of a top pitcher. And you got the big-time defensive lineup out of these guys. You got a lot of really good defensive players here at the bottom of the lineup, hitting a little better than their talent would indicate. Coors can kind of do that because 75 range center fielder, but he's hitting 307 with a 40 hit tool. And then Miles Tolentino, 65 range second baseman with a 45 hit tool, hitting over 300. And then you got Hunter Bishop with a 50 hit tool, hitting over 300. So you have a lot of guys playing a little bit above their head, but also, who knows? Maybe they are that good. We'll see. I think you do have the legitimate stars in Doughty and Olsen and Thomas, and so you got that lineup's playing really well. I imagine they're right near the top, in batting average. Yeah, they're first place, and then you got surprisingly only 10th in home runs. I guess a lot of those defensive guys, not much power. So an interesting Rockies team. Obviously, the pitching stats are never going to look good in Coors, but they are still second in pitcher WAR just because the lack of home runs has really helped them, and solid fifth place defense. Really interesting team. I didn't think they'd be quite this good, but they're playing phenomenal this season, and they're right up there with the Diamondbacks and Rockies, just a couple games back of those two. And then you got the Dodgers and Padres are both kind of starting to fade a little bit. We'll see. The Padres really had a tough couple sims, losing 8 in a row there. They were right up there in second or third place before. So they, again, only 13 games separating all those teams. A lot of wild shit can happen in that division. I think the last thing I'll look at is just kind of those really close division races. You look at their schedules just to see when they play against each other. So the Cards, looks like they play the Pirates at the end of the month, post All-Star game. And then they have one series against Pirates here. A lot of Central teams in this sim, and then that month. And then you got Arizona. They got a tough one. San Francisco, a couple really tough road trip against those Western teams, playing 6 in a row against those first and second place teams there. But then you got Pittsburgh at the end of the month. And then so that's the finish touches of their season there. They'll end the year with that could be a huge series against Pittsburgh near the end of the season there. We'll see. The second last series when those first and second place teams should be really interesting. We'll look at Arizona's schedule to finish out the year. You got looks like you got a pretty tough one, a bunch of playoff teams in that month. This month's a tad easier. You got the couple weaker teams there and a couple crossover games against the AL, against teams that aren't in first and second place. You got a huge month there coming up in September with all divisional games, and it looks like they finish off the year with a series against the Giants and the Rockies. So that's going to be just yet another crazy finish in the NOS, just like last year. It's probably going to come down to the final day. It should be really interesting. And then I'll look at mine. I haven't actually done that yet. See the end of the season. We got me and Washington playing. So it should be really interesting. Washington, if they're close to me, was 6 games out of the final 2 sims or 3 sims there. So that'll be really cool. We'll see how this season ends up going. So that'll be it for this episode. I rambled on a little bit long, but I definitely just wanted to cover all that playoff stuff. And so the next episode will be at you in a couple days here. Cheers.